We have a 2025-07 ordinance to exceed the 2025 municipal budget appropriation limits and to establish a cap bank.
Do you want to do the presentation first?
Do you want to do the presentation first?
Yeah, the presentation.
All right.
Yeah.
So we've got that ordinance. Yeah, if they want. Do we need to set up the presentation at all?
It's here.
All right.
And we
So
can
why
present.
don't we do the budget presentation, and then we'll go through the various ordinances that will be associated with that. And have a good night.
Thank you and
everybody.
congratulations, guys. Thank you.
Yeah,
Off to work.
it does involve you.
It'll help you sleep. I promise. Sorry, Joe.
Yeah.
If I can clear myself out. Thank you.
So, yeah, Joe Monzo, our acting CFO. Thank you.
And for those of you who don't know me, Joe Monzo, I'm the acting interim CFO. In the audience is your next CFO, Christian Bouchel, who I asked to come and is sitting in the audience. For tonight's meeting, I've done a couple of things. You should have received over the course of the last several days, most of it I think was on Thursday, a copy of the presentation which we're going to do. A 5-page memo going over some of the highlights and lowlights of what happened last year and what we expect to happen this year. You should have also got a copy of the revenues and appropriations by line item compared to last year's budget adoption to this year's budget proposal. And then you should have gotten a copy of the 8.5 by 14 PDF, very big PDF of the official state budget document. Very difficult to read. What I thought we'd do first is talk a little bit in terms of a PowerPoint presentation. I did not have time to do a bells and whistles presentation, but I wanted to give the governing body and the audience members a sense of what to expect in this year's budget. Okay? So, who's running the controls? Great.
Joe, pull your mic closer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just put it on.
I didn't realize it wasn't on, I'm sorry. Okay, what is a municipal budget? For those of you who don't know, it's like it's a township's, checkbook. Just like your household budget, it shows what we expect to bring in terms of revenue and how we plan to spend it, and you'll see a couple slides on that a little bit later. Most importantly, these are your tax dollars. Everybody here is a township resident. It impacts everything you do, from fixing potholes, which we've talked about, keeping the public safe, police are here, keeping the park lights on, plowing snow, recreation, senior activities, everything. Next slide. What I'd like to talk about first is that on January 1st at 12:01 a.m., this is how you started out the year. Okay? You had 3 budget revenues in last year's budget that are not available for this year's budget. Right? You had municipal relief aid, which was a 2-year state aid program. I believe it was mostly funded by the ARP money that the state got. That revenue is no longer available to any municipality in the state of New Jersey. For Hillsborough, with $339,000 that you will not have available this year. You sold a liquor license that was anticipated at $483,000. It did come in higher, but in terms of the budget, and then you also sold a piece of property for $626,000. So right off the top, 3 revenues that are $1.4 million that are not available in this year's budget. In addition, I only highlighted 3 items, but there are several others. Your pension bill went up $377,000. That's the township's obligation to the state of New Jersey to fund the public employees retirement system and the police and fire retirement system pensions. Okay? Your joint insurance fund assessments went up $83,000, and your health insurance fund assessments went up $345,000. Those 6 items together are $2.25 million that when the calendar year started on January 1st, you were already in the hole, $2.25 million, okay? You are not alone, if that makes you feel any better, right? Everybody in the state lost the municipal relief aid money. Everybody in the state saw their pension bill, their joint insurance fund bill, and their health insurance fund, or if they're a member of state health benefits, saw those bills increase, right? Every one of the 564 towns experienced those same things, okay? So, makes the budget year difficult. Every year is difficult. It makes this coming year more difficult because of the loss of revenue and some statutory increases that you have literally no control over. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Okay. As you're aware from having sat on the committee for a few years, every municipality has to deal with two caps, right? It's not an acronym. It's an artificial limitation, right? The first one is on spending and the second one's on the tax levy. So the spending cap says that you cannot increase municipal spending for those items that are within the municipal spending categories by more than 2.5%, or if you adopt the cost of living adjustment ordinance, which is the one you started to read, you can add another 1% to that. And then there are some other escalators that can add on to that amount of money, okay? The maximum you can increase your spending for those items from last year to this year is a little shy of $1.5 million. When we put the budget together, it required us to move some of the items from inside the cap to outside the cap, shared services, because you have several shared services, and you're allowed to put some of the costs associated with those shared services outside the cap, okay? Still an appropriation for you, but it's in a different bucket of money. And the Director of Local Government Services, as you saw in one of the local finance notices that I sent you also, allow towns to take any workers' comp, health benefits, or general liability costs over a certain percentage and move them outside the cap, because the also garbage and trash and recycling, which you didn't have any of those, because the cost of those have risen to the level that municipalities can't operate within the cap because of the increases. So the budget that is before you tonight for introduction is within the spending cap. It has to be, or it cannot be introduced officially. The other cap is the levy cap. It's a limitation on the total amount to be raised by taxes within your municipal budget, okay? You find that on sheet 11 of your state budget document. The maximum you are allowed to increase your levy is $2.8 million. You're allowed through the legislation to have certain items that, again, so the law, it's 2% increase statutorily. And there are items that allow you to increase your levy by more than 2% if you are increase those appropriations by more than 2%. Group health insurance, pension, and then you also have a bank from the prior year. So the budget we're presenting to you tonight is a 2.47% increase from last year's levy, but it's a 0.8% increase, less 0.8 of 1 penny in terms of the tax rate, okay? A distinction should be made that the cap is not on the rate. The cap applies to the levy itself. So obviously that's more than 2%, but the law allows certain exceptions for pension, health, capital, debt service. Your increases, your appropriations for capital and debt this year are not greater than last year. If they had been, you'd have exceptions for those also, okay? But you don't, okay? Next slide. So where's the money come from? These are the major budget categories, major budget revenue categories in your budget, from fund balance all the way through other. So the introduced budget that we're putting forth tonight is $40.1 million. 71% of that comes from the current year's tax levy to Hillsborough residents to support the current municipal budget, not the school, not the county, not the fire. Okay, and you can see where the money comes from, but obviously, almost 3/4 of it comes from taxes. Okay, next slide. So where does the money go? These are the major spending categories. Again, these are from the state budget document. Public safety, 25%. Public works, 10%. Insurances, that includes health, workers' comp, general liability, 11% of and pension and social security, 13%. Those are the four big ones. Okay, so you can see what that breakup is. General government includes the governing body, clerk, elections, finance, assessor, collector, engineer, audit, all those sorts of things. Okay. Next slide. This is my favorite. It's also the governing body's least favorite, generally, right? What's under governing body control? Okay. These are my categories. These are nobody else's but mine. Statutory expenses. Those expenses that are required to be budgeted, whether you like it or not, to be perfectly blunt, right? Debt service, your pension obligations, Any deferred charges that you might have had, you have one for $60,000, right? Those are statutory, okay? It's 25% of your budget. Okay? Contractual includes all salaries and wages, right? Health insurance. It's part of your labor contracts, you provide health insurance, right? Joint insurance fund. You've signed a contract to be a member of the joint insurance fund, right? Any other contracts the governing body has awarded, auditor, engineer, planning board attorney, zoning board attorney, all those sorts of contracts that you may have awarded in the beginning of the year, right? They're contractual. Certain things that are in the labor contracts for police are contractual, right? So we've pulled that out. 60% of your budget is contractual, okay? In some fashion, some form of a contract, okay? The cost of your utilities, from street lighting, electric, gasoline, telephone, water, sewer, right? Fire hydrants, right? Is 6% of your budget. That leaves 9%. Of the $40 million budget, that leaves 3.6%. I'm sorry, $3.6 million. That is within the governing body's control. Now, you could say contractual, since I've included salaries, obviously you could change the makeup of the organization, right? But just in terms of trying to put these items into a bucket to see where you are in terms of your conversation about the budget, this is the document that I've provided for you. Okay. Who pays for your taxes? Oh, you're way ahead of me. Thank you. Hillsborough was 86.32%. These are last year's percentages from the Somerset County Abstract of Ratables. 86.32% of your taxes come from residential property. Okay? The next biggest is commercial, 6.06%. Okay? So the residences are impacted by your budget more than any other component. And these 7 items these are the classifications per the State Division of Taxation and the county. Okay? Last year's tax bill, the tax rate overall was $2.14.3. Of that, the local tax bill was only 14%. Okay, I say only, just in terms of the other ones. The schools 65%, the county was 17%, municipality was 14% of the total tax obligation that residents, commercial, all those property values had. The fire district was 2.66, and you have a local open space tax, which is 1.31% of your total tax bill from last year. I don't expect those numbers to change much. The school one might increase depending on what they do with that thing, whatever you want to call it, right? But these are pretty normal percentages, actually, across the state. If you have a school or more than one school, I live in a town that has 2, lucky me, a regional and an elementary school, my numbers are greater on the school side. But these numbers are pretty normal across the state, at least for a town of your size and makeup. Okay. Next slide. Okay. This one's a little busy. I couldn't figure out a way to make it less busy. Your taxes are determined based on your assessed value, okay, of all the properties in town, from the farm through your utilities, all those properties that were on that classification. Last year's assessed value was $8.3 billion. This year's assessed value is $9 billion, okay? Your assessed value increased from last year to this year, $686 million, okay? A lot of that has to do with the fact that Somerset County, in my mind, is the leader of the 21 counties in New Jersey in terms of how they manage their tax assessments. Maybe them and Monmouth, right? They require revaluations. They have compliance plans. They keep the values of their communities up to the market value, right? It's just an outside example. I don't know what Edison's is. I won't embarrass Christian. East Brunswick is 19%, right? So if a house is valued in East Brunswick at $200,000, right, it can sell for $1 million, right? In Hillsborough, you're pretty close to 100% of market, which is where you're supposed to be, okay? And I bring this to your attention for a couple reasons. One, as I said before, the tax rate last year was what, $2.14. In order to change 1 penny of your tax rate, either up or down, right? You have to know what the tax point, what the value of that is in your town. And the way you do that is you take your assessed value and you divide it by 10,000, right? That's the number. So your tax point, 1 cent in your town is worth $906,000, right? So if you sat here tonight and said, let's say I'd given you a budget that had a 1 penny increase, and you said, we don't want a 1 penny increase, we want a 0 increase. We'd have to find a way to either increase revenue or decrease appropriations to the tune of $906,000, okay? That's difficult to do. So as I've said to some of you individually and some of you collectively, your assessed value is a blessing and a curse, right? It's a blessing because your property values are close to market, right? And you can increase appropriations in your town for employees and for other things and not really change the tax requirement to fund those, because it takes $900,000 of increased appropriations to add 1 penny to the tax rate, okay? On the flip side, if you're trying to reduce the tax obligation, you have to find $900,000 somewhere, which may be a challenge, okay? So as I said, the budget that we're looking to introduce tonight has a 0.8 of 1 cent increase, okay, from last year's rate. And I just gave this little exercise to show you something. If your assessed values had not increased from last year to this year at all, your increase would have been 3.3 cents with the exact same budget, okay? So 0.8 of 1 penny as opposed to 3.3 pennies just because of the increase in your assessed value, okay? 2.5 cents eaten up by the increase in assessed value, okay? The average residential property in Hillsborough is about $550,000 assessed value. So with a budget of an 0.8 of 1 cent increase, it's $44 annually for a residential property that's valued at $550,000. If the assessed value had not increased at all, that same increase would have been $181.50. Okay? And I just bring it to your attention to show you how significant the increased assessed value is. Okay? $9 billion is, it's pretty significant. I worked in South Brunswick for almost 16 years, pretty significantly sized town. The budget is twice yours. The tax point was, when I left, with $380,000. Right, so their assessed value is $3.8 billion. Okay, again, their ratio is like 36%, and that's why, right? Your ratio is somewhere north of 90, I believe, right? Which is why you're at $9 billion, okay? So that's just a couple, finer points or duller points, depending how you want to look at it, okay? So what are the legislative actions that I'm asking you to take tonight? Next slide. I'm asking you to introduce the municipal budget tonight, April 22nd. That will then go to Department of Community Affairs, Division of Local Government Services for their review. Last year, I believe you were local exam, which means the state did not review your budget. They do it every 3 years on a rotating basis. This year, the state will review your budget. They'll present questions to myself and to your auditor based on the budget document and the annual financial statements, and maybe we messed the number up here or there, or a couple things don't match up, and they'll ask us to correct those. And then we have scheduled the public hearing based on the information that's in the resolution tonight, the public hearing and hopefully the adoption of the budget on May 27th. And I say hopefully. The state may require an amendment, maybe. The governing body may require an amendment from the introduction to the adoption. They may want to increase or decrease something somewhere along the line. And if that's the case, we'll probably be able to adopt on the 27th, but there may be a situation where we won't, and then it'll get delayed another 10 days, or 2 weeks. So that's the time frame that we're looking at right now. April 22nd, May 27th. Okay. So I've asked you, so if you have any questions about that, I'll be happy to answer them. If you have any questions about the memo, I'll be happy to answer those also. So I just want to address the ordinance that you're going to introduce. So it's effectively known as the COLA ordinance, Cost of Living Adjustment Ordinance, that, again, it's not a requirement, but it's a necessity. If you adopt that ordinance, what that does is it adds the ability to increase the spending side of your budget by an additional 1% over what the state said the cost of living increase was for this year, which is 2.5%. The statute says you can go to 3.5%. Okay, so you get to add 1 extra percent if you need it. Okay, this is on the spending side. If you don't need it, which we do, but if you don't need it, whatever you don't use, you get to use in future years. Okay, so that's the benefit of adopting the ordinance. Many years ago, maybe 10, the legislature didn't require it. You just got the benefit of it no matter what. Now you're required to adopt an ordinance. I don't like the language in the ordinance. It makes it seem as if you're absolutely going to go over the spending that the state says is appropriate. On the flip side, the state statutes allow you to go to 3.5. Just because the director says in any given year that the cost of living is between 0 and 3.5, the statutes say you can go to 3.5. That's their limitation. There's no reason why you should not take advantage of that in the years in which you need it. Okay, so that's what that ordinance is for. It has to be introduced before the budget introduction legislatively. That's just a quirk. And then when you adopt it, it has to be adopted before the budget is adopted, just in terms of timing. Okay, so that's my presentation.